we're becoming numb to graphic and extreme content. And then kind of combining that with kids having access to devices at younger and younger ages. And I know the debate is also like, let's delay the phone, but then we give an iPad that has a lot of the same capabilities. And so I think we have to be looking at the accessibility across the board, not just like, I'm not going to give the phone, but here's everything else on the kitchen table. You know what I mean?
Hi, and welcome to the Kindled podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves.
Welcome to the Kindled podcast. Today, we're talking about technology and kids and social media and screens and all of that. We have a really cool guest. Adrian, tell us who we're talking to today.
We are talking to Brock Murphy. He's a graduate of Texas A&M University with time spent in the agriculture industry at the White House and at SpaceX. After being approached by parents and teachers to solve various problems about new technology and applications, he co-founded Parent ProTech to help empower families and educators with the tools and knowledge needed to safely navigate technology. And this is something that I think is so important and top of mind for so many people because it feels like the robots are taking over. We're not going to talk about robots.
True that.
But we're going to talk about
that's a different
social
episode.
media and phones. And yes, that's a different episode. But the technology is taking over and it seems like they are targeting our kids. So what can we as parents and educators do? Well, there's so much that we can do. And Parent ProTech is there to help us.
Let's go talk to Brock.
Brock, welcome to the Kindled podcast. We are so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so let's dive in. Tell us about who are you? Give us a little bit about your background, how you came to the work that you're doing today. I find your story to be super fascinating, and I'd love to share it with our listeners. And then also, can you tell us what is your big why?
Yeah. So my background is heavier on the government side. So spent time on Capitol Hill for a little bit, and then was at the White House. While at the White House, worked in the Office of Management and Budget, and really looked at federal financial management and federal procurement policy, and then kind of created a niche looking at adversarial nations and their impact on our education system. So love my time doing that, and but then kind of got a little bit tired of the polarization that DC shockingly had. I know, big shock, and made my way down to South Texas and started to work for Elon Musk at SpaceX for a little bit, and learned so much being around the top engineering brains in the entire world. Got to work on a really cool project. And then early 2021 kept being approached by like parents and teachers and administrators with questions that they had about technology, and really, really quickly realized that there was a big disconnect between what people kind of hoped they knew about all of the platforms that our kids are surrounded by, the type of content that they can be so easily exposed to, and like even who they could be communicating with online. And so kind of launched Parent ProTech out of that realization with the big goal of like, how do we empower families to be more active, be more engaged in what their kids are doing online and make it really easy. So I'll kind of transition from that background to like my why. But I think for me, like coming from the government and the space realm, and then grew up on a ranch in Missouri and Texas. And so a lot of like different industries that I've been blessed to be a part of and to be in. But I feel like the Parent ProTech, like online safety piece has really felt like a calling, And like we always say, our mission really is, at the end of the day, if we can prevent just one kid from being cyberbullied, or if we can help prevent just one kid from being trafficked, or if we can help prevent just one kid from getting addicted to a screen, then we've won. And so I'd say that's my why, and that's the team of Parent ProTech's why as well.
It's a really profound why. And so I'm curious, rewind a little bit. So why were parents coming to you? Like, did you have a background in this, or were you just really fascinated about it? Like, why were the administrators and parents asking you about technology?
No, that's a good question. I mean, I have a very entrepreneurial background. And so like, developed an app when I was in college. And then the government piece, I think, added some trust and like validity to the work that I do. And so I guess it was a combination of that, with being open and approachable and being techie to help answer questions.
And probably being younger. I'm going to guess that you were younger than some of the parents too. So like you're more aware of what's going on. I just feel so old. I'm just like, I don't even know what this thing is. Like
a little bit younger, I'd say, from the people that were reaching out. And I guess on that too, like myself and most of the team, like we grew up in this kind of tech boom. And so a lot of these issues, though it's dramatically changed since like I was in grade school, in high school, all of that, we were kind of that first generation of like living through it, which I think helps with the conversation and perspective through it all too.
Absolutely. So can you explain what Parent ProTech is? And you kind of talked about what motivated you to start it, but you didn't really explain what it is and what you guys are doing.
True. Yes, would love to. So Parent ProTech, we've taken a very like preventative, very education approach to tackling the online safety piece. And so when I say that, we've really identified the key stakeholders in the entire equation. So for us, we think that's the parent or caregiver. We think that's the student themselves. And then we think it's like the educator or the youth pastor, that other adult leader in their life, whoever it might be. And so focusing on those three areas, we've built a platform to really hone in and support all three of those different stakeholders. And so we've got an on-demand family library, family dashboard, really trying to meet families where they are on the tech journey. So whether they have questions on whatever phase they're in, whether it's what device they should get their kid, which we view as such an important milestone and kind of critical moment in the child's online safety relationship, or it's, diving into the social media platforms that kids are surrounded by and thrown into at such young ages. And so we've got all of those resources that we make available to families. And then we've also got a full K-12 digital citizenship curriculum that's being utilized in the classroom. So really trying to build on like the foundations of digital footprint. What you post today could come back and haunt you when you apply to your dream job or medical school, to we're in an election year, like deciphering fact from fiction online, which I think that would be applicable to more than just kids today. I always laugh because my grandma, I always say, like, don't believe everything you view on Facebook. Don't click links. And she believes it, and then she clicks the link.
Well, because she didn't grow up like we talked about, like she didn't grow up with technology, and I notice, at least my friends that have their parents really involved in their kids. We live across the country from our parents, so my kids don't have grandparents close by. But I noticed that they tend to be the first ones that are handing over these devices because they didn't have it growing up, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so much easier." But then we have to start educating, what it's doing to brain development, what it's doing to, all sorts of things happening. So where are you getting all of your information from as like you're building this on-demand, platform? I'm currently reading Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and the data in that is just crazy. So are you looking at this same sort of things?
Yes, we are. And so like we big fans of Jonathan Haidt and the Anxious Generation book. Everyone should buy it and read it. If they get that, regardless, they should do it. And so we look at like experts like Jonathan, but then we also, having the government background too, we try to keep an eye on different reports. Like the U.S. Surgeon General came out with a report early 2023 on online safety and impacts on mental health. The big stat, one of the big stats in that was kids who spend 3 or more hours per day on social media face double the risk of depression and anxiety. And so definitely trying to, and then FBI reports and more of those really trusted, credible sources. And then we're also to the point now though, where we're in a couple hundred communities across the country, and starting to support more global institutions, but really trying to leverage kind of the feedback that we're getting from educators, from teachers, from parents, from our interactions in the classroom too. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
what do you feel like are the most significant challenges that parents are facing when it comes to kids and technology? Like, what are we up against here?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I feel like one of the first big things is like how much tech has changed since like 2007, I guess, when the iPhone was first released, and just how much access and like content, entertainment, everything is just at the fingertips of everyone today. And so all the responsibility that lies in that. I think another challenge is like some of the brightest minds in the world are working on designing platforms that are like sticky. And so to capture the click, the view, all of these different things. And so the addiction component is so easy to fall into that trap. I also want to say that I feel like even content that would have been posted like 5 years ago and deemed like really graphic and horrible is just so easily available, even on like Netflix today. And so there's kind of this, we're becoming numb to graphic and extreme content. And then kind of combining that with kids having access to devices at younger and younger ages. And I know the debate is also like, let's delay the phone, but then we give an iPad that has a lot of the same capabilities. And so I think we have to be looking at the accessibility across the board, not just like, I'm not going to give the phone, but here's everything else on the kitchen table. You know what I mean? So I'd say those are kind of the major challenges that we've been looking at and really trying to focus in on.
You mentioned several kind of like shifts in, over time. Like, are there any other kind of significant shifts that like demonstrate that the digital landscape has kind of evolved? And I think sometimes as parents, we're like, okay, I've got a handle on this. I have an app on my phone that's like monitoring things. Like, we're good. Like, this is no longer a problem. But then things change rapidly, right? And like, if you're not constantly vigilant about, so like, talk about what kind of changes have happened, like what parents might not know.
No, I mean, I think it's easy to fall in the trap of like, we've downloaded the app and so we can have our hands off and not worry about it. But as you mentioned, these platforms are constantly being changed. Mm-hmm. And also like Apple doesn't really like giving up their like API tied to screen time. And so the data that some of these monitoring platforms are getting, if it's like an app on an iPhone, is maybe working fine. But if Apple launches an update like iOS 18 coming up, they're going to be scrambling to figure out how they can shift all of their platform to. In other words, it's definitely not like a set it up and forget about it and think everything's fine, because a lot of these platforms too that we can see, or some of them, have a lot of holes that are able to be exposed and taken advantage of by the child. And also, so kind of wrapping back around to your question though, I think that our philosophy really is like, if you're looking at the pyramid, the base of the pyramid has to be the relationship that a parent builds with their child, and like the conversations they have with their child around technology, the dangers, all of that. And when you lead purely with like the restriction and the lockdown, or the app that you think handles everything, it creates a relationship where they're going to either, we've seen a rise in the amount of kids like getting burner phones. There are a lot of ways like to power. I know, like powering off the device to get it to reset. Like there are a ton of different things that can be done, where we think like if we can build this healthy relationship, then if the child comes across content, then they rush back to the parent or the caregiver. Whereas if you lead with like the restriction and like danger and the scare tactic, which I think we have to also live in reality of the situation. But I think we can see some changes and shifts happening in that regard of like making sure that we know that better relationship is like really building the foundation through having the conversation and all that. So
do you provide any neuroscience or like helping parents understand what's happening from that level? As you're talking, I'm thinking of super normal stimuli. And so basically our brains have evolved to need certain things. So communication is one of those, and having relationships with others. And so Facebook and Instagram, it's by millionfold. I wanted to say tenfold, but it's like causing this need. And then so every time there's a ding, every time we've been trained, like psychological conditioning is happening. So are you educating parents on those types of things and helping them make sense of it? Or are you trying to stay surface level? Like how deep do you get? Because for me, that really motivates me to go, okay, we do need to have some boundaries. We do need to forge our own path instead of just doing what every other parent is doing or every other kid is doing, because I'm really understanding the neurobiology behind it, the neuroscience behind it, the shifting, and what, Jonathan Haidt calls like having a phone-based education versus a play-based education. And he even really goes into being in, defensive mode versus discovery mode. So I have all these things in my mind to help motivate me to make these decisions. So I'm curious, like, where you fit in that.
Yeah, so that I think one of the biggest, like you said, impacts of technology on all of us, not just on the developing brain, is those really big drawbacks and impacts that unbridled access to tech can have. And so we actually interviewed a neuroscientist in the Houston area about a year ago and really kind of unpacked the tech in the brain, which was really, really fascinating. So we've got kind of that series on our platform that families can dive into. The big thing, I think, that one of the large takeaways from our conversation with her was, for teens, she always says that they have a overdeveloped accelerator and an underdeveloped brake system. And so when you combine that with the full access to the internet and everything that comes with it, it kind of creates a recipe for disaster. And then it's no surprise that we're dealing with all the large impacts that we are. And so we've got the approach of like, I definitely am not a neuroscientist, and I struggle enough with saying the word neuroscientist that that's as close as I'm going to get. But we're very lucky to have like a network and a team that has the expertise. And so we try to bring subject matter experts within our fold, especially in areas where we really want families like and educators to know and administrators to know like the impacts that all of that can have, because especially today when schools, micro schools are all having the conversation of like device access, and like, should phones be allowed, not allowed, lock them up, not to lock them up, all of that. And then looking at kind of tying in what you were talking about is the average amount, a Common Sense Media stat said that teens in the US today get an average of 237 notifications a day, which when you take out like time they're sleeping, it averages out to like a notification every 4 minutes. And so if that's happening all day during the school day, like their focus is going to be on that, not on the teacher. I mean, I'm even wondering, my phone's over here, how many notifications I'm going to have and emails that I'm going to have to read later tonight after work. So
even just, the phone being present.
Yeah. Being in the room,
distracted.
like, or even, you have to like turn it completely off to like really be free of it. So you're always wondering.
Totally.
I want to circle back to what you said though. I really like the way this was framed, the overdeveloped accelerator and underdeveloped brakes. I think that right there alone is so important for us to understand. I was just at the eye doctor yesterday with all three of my boys. I have a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, 7-year-old. And the eye doctor, I could tell we weren't in alignment with education, with all the things, because he's like, so can you guys see the board? And my kids are looking at him like, what board are you talking about? Because they don't go to normal schools. And then like with my little one, he hasn't even started his micro school. He starts, soon. And he was like, you should be in school. You are 7. Well, and then he looked at me and said, well, how are they getting instruction then if they don't have a board to look at? So I could already tell like his paradigm around education is very differently than mine. And then his paradigm around computers and technology. And he's an eye doctor. So I can only imagine how he's seen eye strain and all kinds of things come from, blue light and technology. But he said to me, he was like, well, I get that you're trying to keep your kids off of computers. He said, but every single person, they're growing up with these computers. They have to be on them. And even my landscaper uses a computer. And I wanted to say to him, you should know, you're a doctor, that they have overdeveloped accelerators right now and underdeveloped brakes until they're fully developed. Yes, they're going to have to be on a computer. They're going to need to use technology. Yes, but their brains are still so underdeveloped. And I can only imagine the impact that it's having on their brain. So I was just sitting there like taking deep breaths. Like, I'm not going to get into an argument with him about it right now. But I think what you said there is really, really important for us to understand. Yes, technology is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. Our kids are going to need to use it, but we do kind of need to look at where they are developmentally, and then self-control and impulse control or you're saying all those notifications, not only can they not focus on what they're learning, but I would think that the brain is also in this survival state, this hyper-arousal or hyper-vigilance is probably happening as well. And my son's school did read Anxious Generation, and they are following it. And they bought little lock boxes for all the classrooms, and they've been doing a lot of trial and error. It's a middle school and a high school. It's a very non-traditional progressive school. And they said, they started out with, okay, they can have them on breaks. They go outside a lot, they're on breaks. Let's see how that goes. And they started out by putting them in the box before the class, getting them out after. Well, some kids would forget, and then they didn't know what box they were in. And so it kind of caused a little bit of chaos. And then they said, we're going to do a test. And they emailed all the parents. They told all the students and said, today we're going to you can't have a phone out. If we see it out, it goes in the box if you want it. But it can't be on your person. It needs to be put away from the beginning of school to the end of school. And let's just see what happens. And they said just from that one day, social engagement went up, engagement in the class went up. I'm like, you guys need to be part of a research study or something. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to go. And what my son told me was he is convinced to get kids to do anything, you have to have them all do it at one time, because he said not a single student has complained because they're all having to do it. And they're actually liking to not, they're enjoying not having a phone and having this almost like social pressure that you have to be, on a phone.
Good. Well, and I will say I have heard one drawback of the whole like locking up the phone during the school day, and it's created, and we've seen it in a few of our partner schools, but that it creates a closer like they use the platform or like the device way more when they're out of school. Then that attachment is a lot stronger outside of school hours because they're not getting to check it all through the day.
They're not getting those dopamine hits throughout the day.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
But I did want to touch up on one thing that you mentioned, and it's kind of like with the eye doctor is like, well, everyone else does it, but that doesn't mean it's right.
Right.
And that we should all continue.
But we've normalized it. Kind of like you said, we become numb. You go on Netflix, you don't even have to go to the actual shows. It's showing up on the top, of some really graphic images. And I'm just trying to go find a Bluey show or something for my little kid,
Whenever I'm doing, whenever we're on Amazon Prime search or something, like my kids know, like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to search something. They all just look away because they have no idea what's going to be put on the screen. And I'm like, I think we need to change this. And something that Jonathan Haidt talks about in that book is that it does need to be like a societal change, and something that it is very hard for parents to withstand but everyone else has it kind of argument from their kids. And so he points to things like alcohol and smoking. Like we have, like, these things are bad. They're unhealthy for all of us, obviously, but like they're particularly bad for the developing brain, right? And so we have expectations and laws in place. And he talks about the age of internet adulthood being 13 and how that was like set by some law in like 1997 before any of this happened. And no one's policing it. No one's like, you have to be 13 you have to click a box that says you're 13 to make a Google account or something where you can make all of these accounts, and no one checks it. And
it's not verified.
It's not verified. So it's like, there's really no controls on this. And, I've heard people say like, well, the genie's out of the bottle. Like you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like it's too late now. And he goes back through history a little bit and he's like, nope, the genie was back in the bottle here. And we successfully put it back in. Like we have done this. There's historical precedent for pulling things back like this, but it's going to take all of us as parents to say the new social media age is 16, and none of your 14-year-old friends have Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and make that the new norm. I think it's going to take a long time. I was just having a conversation with some kids at my house, and my oldest is 11. And I've told my kids, our phone age is 20, because I know by the time they're 14, 15, 16, they'll have talked me down to 16 or 17. Whereas that's I'm very super conservative and all of this stuff. So don't follow my example. Think I'm a crazy head, whatever. It's fine. But my, all of my,
I embrace that too, Katie.
All of the kids in my house were like, oh, our phone age is 11. Our phone age is 12. I'm like, well, I'm about to share a book with your parents and your phone age is about to change, because your parents just don't know yet that this is not going to be a good thing for you. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to help educate them, even if it's going to be really annoying and passive aggressive maybe, but but we have to do it a social,
well, Brock,
we have to do it together is what I'm promoting here.
But Brock, you said that you've seen in some of these schools that then they get home. I'm curious, are those schools doing education with the parents? What this school is doing is they already are having meetings with parents. They're recommending that everyone reads Anxious Generation. So they are doing it as a collective whole, not just, at school, this is what we're doing. You go home and do whatever you want. And obviously it's not going to be with every single parent, every single child, but they're doing a really, I think, they're coming alongside the parents, because that's what school should be doing anyways, right? It should be a relationship. And that's what you said, is that foundation is relationship, I think parent-child, but then also parent to school, school to child. There's lots of relationships here, not just one.
Yeah. And in the ones that I have looked at having that really negative impact at the end of the school day, those are ones that like we're not working with. But when we pair up with like not to be that guy, but when we pair up with like the Yonder Pouch group at a school, and then we can hit it on all cylinders, from like devices are locked up, but we're also educating the kids on the impacts of tech and how they can use it for good and minimize the bad and the ugly impacts. And then also kind of being that really big education partner to direct to families, like that's where I feel like the perfect scenario plays.
And student education, I think, is huge in this, but not just telling them, but modeling, I think, is really huge. And then also what they're doing is they're partnering with Let Grow as well. And they're doing Let Grow projects. And so getting them to do actual, real, independent things. So almost saying, okay, we're not just taking your phone away, but we're going to do really fun projects in the classroom. And then also outside the classroom, we're going to ask your parents to partner with us to let you go to the park and let you make dinner. And I mean, that still blows my mind that 12 to 18-year-olds are not doing that, because obviously, or apparently we're not the norm, but
I think we knew that. I think we've known that.
So they're also, we're not the norm. But they're bringing to light like, hey, this is not just what the research is saying, but that we're seeing this in your own child and how they're just lighting up. And so, hey, will you partner with us, and let's give them other things to do than just to be on a phone and constantly stimulating their brains.
No, I love that. Yeah. And that directly ties into Jonathan and the play-based childhood rather than the phone-based. So yeah, so much value in that. I do think though, like schools and like parents need to think about like just locking up the device is only one part of the equation. So the education can't be overlooked.
So what are some common mistakes parents make in regards to their kids using social media? So we're talking about just locking up their phone is not good enough. So what else should parents be looking at?
I think it ties into exactly what we were talking about, of like, just because everyone is allowing it or giving access to it doesn't mean that everyone should. But I also think the power of community really comes into play here as well. And I'd say for sure for like micro school communities as well, is like banding together to either delay the phone in general, or to pick a family-friendly, kid-friendly phone like Pinwheel or Gab or TrueMe or Bark, instead of rushing to just give an iPhone. But I think the easiest and most impactful thing is obviously trying to catch it before access is already given, and to band together as a community to say, we're going to wait till 8th grade or after 8th grade or till 20. And then from there, kind of really sticking to that plan. But yeah, it completely ties back into like, just because everyone else does it doesn't mean we all should.
So what is your advice for setting boundaries, and what kind of conversations should parents be having with kids about social media and online safety? It really didn't hit my kids until we have a friend's daughter who was going through the police academy. And then that was what she was responsible for. And she was sharing some stories, and they were like, oh, this is real. It's not just my parents telling me that these things happen online, and not just with girls, but with boys too. And so I'm curious, like, how do you educate parents on that? And what is your advice about boundaries?
I feel like it kind of comes down to the conversation, for sure, the conversations, and like looping it in, if age appropriate, like those stories that we hear about way too often. And kind of like on a general kind of across the board, just highlighting like, don't take everything online as like face value. And like, if you ever get a weird feeling, if you are on the platform when that time comes, like investigate, like tell mom and dad, tell trusted adult, on like the misinformation piece, like look for multiple sources to validate whether something is true or whether it's false. Like kind of more along those types of conversations, but then also like general safety advice of like protect your passwords and protect your personal information, and like who is fine to tell your home address or your personal phone number or email or whatever it might be. Like really trying to have those conversations and that dialogue before anything comes up, and then kind of reinforcing kind of the foundations, like overemphasizing and oversharing rather than just doing it once and forgetting about it.
Make it a conversation.
Yeah. But I do think it ties in like that kids notice, like kids notice the habits that parents and those around them have with technology too. And so kind of that modeling healthy tech behavior too.
For sure. Something that I've noticed recently, and my kids, like with Prenda, we use a lot of that like app-based education and tech tools. So my kids are on computers quite a bit, and they're like doing things like Duolingo or Scratch, like things that I would deem as like very high value educational experiences. I think something that parents should be aware of is that these platforms, even though they're educational, like they have social, like the social aspect built into them. And so it's like, it's not Instagram, it's not TikTok. It's like, we're safe. Like it really isn't. And like the other day, like my daughter was doing something on Duolingo, and I was just watching her, and there's like, you can do friend request, like there's all sorts of like little things built in. I'm like, oh, we got to shut this down. Like I thought you were just on Duolingo, and I didn't even know that there were ways that you could connect with strangers on Duolingo, or like on Scratch, you can like talk to other kids. And it's like, oh, we need to be really every
Roblox.
single thing. Roblox, yeah. Like all of these things, they can talk to people. And even though it's not a social media platform, or you think your kids don't have social media, like they're talking to people on the internet, and that is social and it's media. So like expanding our definition of social media, maybe.
Yeah. I feel like one of the big shocking stories I heard about a year ago was there was like a loophole on the Bible app that kids were leveraging to like send pictures or like something like that, which it's been, they've fixed the issue now, but like if there's a way
on the pinwheel, it had it as red. So pinwheel is can you explain like what that is in a better way than I will? And then I can get to the story.
I don't know if I'll be able to better than you, but a phone built for kids gives a lot of controls to parents on like what apps that they can use, but they also have they code the different apps into like red being bad, which I think is, or like caution, I guess.
It says it violates their whatever, because they do all this research and they work with psychologists. And so they have a red, a yellow, and green. And Bible app was red. And I was wondering why it was red. But my son was using Cash App to get onto YouTube. And I'm like, why? How in the world is he able to use Cash App? Should just be able to, give him money so that like that's where we give him his allowance so that he has access to it and he has a card attached to it. And he was using that to get to other like social media platforms, and because they have like, you can go and shop. So there's all these like loopholes and things. So are these things on Parent ProTech so the parents know, like Duolingo, you can connect with other people, like Cash App, or like how much do you get into those types of things?
Yeah, we try to dive completely in and find those loopholes that kids like to exploit. And we also realize like I'm getting older and older, obviously. And so I'm not one of the cool kids anymore that is in the know. Even our creative team, they've been doing a lot more like trends lately. And the past couple that they've been sending to me, I'm like, this makes no sense. It does, like, it's not funny, but supposedly it was a trend. And so we've got like interns and kids who are kind of like spotters for us, looking for like the loopholes that others are exploiting, or kind of sharing conversations that they're having at school and at practice and all of that. That way we can stay in the know and then communicate all that out to our users.
That's so smart. You call them spotters. Is that their official title?
No, I guess you just label
it
as like intern or something, but spotters would be better. So.
That's so smart. So what tips do you have for parents who want to continuously educate themselves about technology, but also not get overwhelmed? Because I have gotten to that place where it is just too much at times. I rather just no phones, no computers, no anything. It's just so much easier. So what tips do you have for parents?
No, it's funny because my mind went straight to like follow accounts on social media that are like tracking all of this, but then I feel weird about recommending
social media to, yes, I know. Same thing.
Exactly.
I feel that way a lot too.
No, I think the big thing that I'd say is, like we have to kind of ground or like start our conversation somewhere. And so I think part of it is like investing in figuring out what platforms and devices like our kids are using, want to use, that their friends are using, whatever it might be. Because from there, I think it's easier to know and to kind of have the conversation of like how we can make those platforms safer, or at least you as a parent know like what debate or challenge is going to come up as they get closer to the age that everyone else is getting social media. And so I think that's kind of where I recommend that we start. And then from there, like I've got tons of different media alerts on the top platforms and kind of top tech companies that are out there to keep up with all of the changes that are happening. And then like Apple makes it really easy that as they update, you can go in and read the patch notes. So like what changes they've made or what new feature they've added, stuff like that. All of that though, I think requires quite a bit of time on the parent angle. So that's where like, I feel like finding like a tool that helps with making that education piece easier and like staying up to date on all the changes being important. But also I think if we don't know what platforms that our kids are on and at least take that first step, then the net's going to be so spread out that you're going to fail kind of across the board, or we can get really targeted on the specific issues. But then also like really investing time with your child, and like if they like playing video games, like hop on the beanbag and play a round of Fortnite or whatever it is, and they're gonna laugh and make fun of you, but you'll have a better idea of like what the platform and the game even is. They're gonna notice that you're invested in them and want to meet them where they enjoy. And it's just a good kind of strengthening of that relationship and bond.
Yeah. Or the approach I take, I just don't let my kids play Fortnite. But what I'm hearing too is you can't take a back seat. If you're allowing your kids to have technology. If you're handing them over a device, again, to reference Jonathan Haidt, he opens up the book about sending kids to Mars and how we've seen that would be crazy to do that, but yet we're handing them these devices that they have access to who knows what. And so we really can't take a backseat approach if we're allowing our kids to have access to computers, video games, social media, any kind of technology. You said about getting on the apps or being aware what apps they are using. And hopefully you have a good enough relationship with your child that they are sharing that. So if they're not, there might need, again, relationship first. We've talked about that multiple times. I recall when I was a high school senior photographer, I had a team of girls. They're all, 17, 18. And this was back in 2013, 14. Snapchat was still fairly newish. I think it came out in like 11 or 12. And all the girls were using it in school. I only joined it to connect with them. I wasn't even their parent, but I was like, okay, this is what they're on. This is really new to me. It's kind of scary. I don't know what this is. It disappears. What is this? And they were just snapping all day long while they're in chemistry, while they're in classes. And I had a parent say to me, I told her, I said, oh, are you aware your daughter's on Snapchat? Are you on Snapchat? She's like, oh yeah, but I don't want anything to do with that. That's her thing. And I was just like, yeah, but you need to see what she's doing on there. You need to see what activities is happening, because if you're giving your child a device, and this is not to be judgmental at all, but if you're handing a child a device and that is your responsibility to ensure that your child's being safe, you gotta know what apps they're using. Or like with my son, I'm thinking he just has Cash App on his phone. And so I was like, he's disappearing a lot. What is going on? And not acting like he normally does. That's just because he was watching scooter videos and how to be a better scooterer, which is much better than some things he could be watching.
Scooterist.
But then we just started having a conversation about it instead of like, no phone, you can't have this. This is horrible. Because that's not the right approach with kids either. What you're saying is to be invested in what is important to them. Really start with relationship and connection. And then from there, once they, see that you are on their side, maybe they'll be like, oh, you know what? This probably isn't the healthiest for me. Or, hey, I need help with this. Or, we've seen that with our kids.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah.
Okay. So can you take me through a little bit, what are the resources that ProTech offers, and how can I just signed up for your newsletter a minute ago, and if I sign up or get access, what will I see?
Yeah. So we've got kind of three main kind of ways that communities can get involved. One, subscribing to the newsletter. We kind of keep track of all the major changes, earlier in the year when all the big tech CEOs testified in DC. We had a whole edition on kind of what do we make of it? What's going to happen with that? And then we're trying to keep up to date with all the major changes happening in the tech realm. So that's one way. The other way, individuals can sign up for the full ProTech platform, and that includes all the family content, the how-tos, the walkthroughs, all of that type of content, and the student curriculum and student programming that you can watch with your kids. The third way is reaching out, and we do more church-wide or school-wide, micro-school-wide kind of partnerships where we can provide the entire community access at a very discounted rate. And then kind of with all of that, we open up a few hours every Friday where if families are battling really, really tough specific challenges when it comes to tech, that we can really meet them where they are and really try to lean in and support. And I didn't mention it. I guess I did mention it earlier, but really back to our why, anything that fits with if we can help prevent one bad thing from happening, to just one of our kids, then anything that aligns with that mission, we want to lean in and support.
Love that.
Yes, thank you. So thank you so much for walking us through how Parent ProTech works and just all the resources that you're providing. And even just to think about hiring younger people that could be spotters. I just find that I'm like, oh, they're really thinking of it all. Like, how can we really get ahead of this instead of being proactive? I feel like this is a really good tool to help parents be, instead of being reactive, it helps parents be proactive, which Parent ProTech, I love that name. It works really well. So this is a question we ask all of our guests. Who is someone who has kindled your love of learning, curiosity, motivation, or passion?
No, so that's a loaded one. I feel like I've been very blessed through kind of every endeavor of having really good mentors, but especially on like the learning and curiosity, motivation, all that. I think I would say like my dad is a really big influence and motivator, especially on like really finding the passion and then that motivation to keep pushing through every up and down, and then really like investing and trying to like learn everything I can about whatever it is that passion is. Like very grateful to have had that influence forever since I've been born. So
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Kindled podcast. This has been a cool conversation and we appreciate your time.
No, thank you.
That's it for today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Kindled podcast. If it was helpful to you, all you need to do is like, subscribe, and follow us on social at PrendaLearn. If you have a question you'd like us to address, leave a comment, or you can also email us at podcast@prenda.com. You can go to our website, prenda.com, and sign up for our weekly newsletter, The Sunday Spark.
The Kindled podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda makes it easy for you to start and run an amazing microschool based on all of the ideas we talk about here on the Kindled podcast. If you want more information about becoming a Prenda guide, just go to prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.